All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of Wellness Unplugged. As always, I have a very special guest because every guest is special. And with me today is Teresa Hildebrand, coming from, I want to say California. Is that right?
That's correct.
How's the weather down there?
Well, for California, it's cold, but it's below 75.
I think my wife might dispute your idea of cold, being that we live not so far from the Rockies here. So
Oh my gosh, yeah. Totally different.
ever so slightly different. Just, have you always lived in California, or yeah?
Yes,
So
born and raised, Southern
and
California.
okay, has it ever snowed down there in your lifetime?
I wouldn't call it snow. I would call it maybe a little bit of hail, slushy, but yeah, no, not really.
Okay, so you're kind of missing out on one of the joys of life, which is when you hit freezing temperatures and you get covered with like multiple feet of this white stuff that you have to
Yeah.
scrape off your driveway. So yeah, that's awesome. All right, so you are a coach yourself, but you have quite a bit of a backstory as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I figure let's just take a deep dive right in there. So you had two very difficult pregnancies after a struggle with infertility, and then you find yourself trying to balance this chaotic schedule because now you have a family, but you also have a husband who's involved in law enforcement and sort of the unpredictability that comes with that. And I think this is what spawned the work that you do in organized chaos. So, can
Mhm.
you share with us a little bit of your backstory here?
Yeah, so I mean, even hearing you kind of talk about that, it kind of really takes me back to a really hard time in our lives. But yeah, we struggled with infertility. We when we got married, we thought, well, we're gonna have two kids whenever, when we decide to, and it didn't
Yeah.
quite work out that way. So we did struggle with infertility. And then when we finally got pregnant, things were going well until I started to not feel well. And I got to the hospital and they said, well, you've developed preeclampsia. And at
Okay.
28 weeks, my son was about to get to 28 weeks gestational age. And they said, well, the only cure for this is to deliver your baby. But my baby was like not ready, was
Yeah.
12 weeks
Yeah.
early, but they had to do that. So it was an emergency C-section. And he spent 73 days in the NICU. Lots of surgeries. He was on a ventilator for 5 weeks. So, long story short, it was very, very difficult for us. And it even, you know, you can imagine how I felt going through that, having my first baby and not being able to take him home. But then you can imagine my husband still working in law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah.
He developed shingles as a result of that, with because of the stress.
Yeah.
And then, we had to struggle with that, having a baby with an oxygen tank, and to trying to deal with having not just a baby, but a baby who needed a lot of care,
Yeah.
additional care. And then 9 months later, we got pregnant with our daughter, and we're like, "Wow, this is a blessing."
Yeah.
But then at 6 months, I got very sick again. This time with listeria. So just really rare things that happen in pregnancies, and they just happen to happen to me.
Yeah.
Um, but that is, we grow through adversities. I
Yeah.
think. But I recovered from that. Another C-section. So it just kind of just one of those things where you just have to deal with it. And you're like, really, is this really happening? But
Yeah.
it made us realize that first off, we were very lucky, because our son made it through. I made
Hmm.
it through. My daughter made it through, and we all got through it together. But the stress of having two babies,
Yeah.
me working full time, and then my husband working in law enforcement, which is unique, has unique challenges. Just trying to juggle all of that was very, very difficult for us. So we had to adapt to that lifestyle
Yeah.
and really think outside the box, when it came to our own personal health, because we were not dealing with that, and we were suffering from those consequences of not taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, and I think when we, you mentioned it, like we have this idea in our head of kind of how we envision our life going, and
Mhm.
that's a good idea. It's nice to have some hope. Nobody wants to go into sort of looking at our future with this sort of cynical perspective. So
Right.
you kind of go and you think, yeah, we're gonna follow like a reasonably traditional path. We get married and we're just gonna have kids and so on. And then you get hit with something that totally unexpected. Um, did you find yourself ever asking questions like, "Why me?" or "Why is this happening to us?" Or how did you deal with it the first time the doctor says to you, "We have this very serious thing we need to talk to you about"?
Mhm. Yeah. That was the first thing I thought, like, why? Why us? We were doing everything so perfect. We were the planners. We were
Yeah.
doing everything right. Um, we thought. But I think that, I don't like to say that things happen for a reason, but I think things happen so that we can grow as human beings.
Yeah.
We do grow out of struggle, because if we don't struggle and life is just easy,
Hmm.
we don't blossom from that.
Yeah.
So, we definitely went through periods of time where we first when we were going through a struggle with infertility, I was blaming myself because I
Right.
actually was diagnosed with PCOS. So, a lot of that guilt came with that diagnosis because I thought, "Well, this is my fault. This is why we can't have babies right now." So there was that, and then obviously when we were going through, and being told that our son was gonna have problems breathing and he might have some developmental problems later on, it was like, "What do we do? Like, this is not fair." All of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
thoughts were going on in our mind, and I think at that moment in time, we weren't in the position of, personal growth that we are now, because
Yeah.
I think that we would have handled it a lot differently, but we wouldn't be here right now had we not
Yeah.
gone through that in that moment in time.
Yeah, and that's why I like to say that Wellness Unplugged, really what we're talking about is kind of between the before and after,
Mhm.
because social media presents a certain type of image for people.
Yeah.
It's like what would you call it, like visual sound bites, for lack of a better term. Here's this and here's this. We don't really get to see the story, or very rarely do we get to see like the story or the real human struggle
Mhm.
behind the picture. But you're right. I find myself often saying I've never met a remarkable person who had an easy life,
Right.
and there's never a good time to go through a growth experience. I don't
Mhm.
think, because
Mhm.
there's a part of us that innately wants to. Our primal nervous system wants us to be comfortable, safe, and warm. Like we don't actually want to, or very rarely do we actually want to throw ourselves into struggle. Like, oh, please make my life more difficult. I'd love that right
Right.
now. Yeah, we don't find ourselves um, saying that very often, and yet here you were. And so, did you find that that put a strain on your relationship? Because again, I think people would look now and be like, "Oh my gosh, you guys have this amazing, this incredible, very powerful and strong relationship, and it's very
Mhm.
admirable." But at that point in time, I think it would have put a fairly heavy strain on it.
Yes, absolutely, and, a lot of we already had a strained relationship because of his career.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to have holidays where, you don't
Yep.
spend time with your spouse and, you don't see him for long, long periods of time. So we didn't have the ability to really work on our relationship. And I don't think we had the tools back then to really, you know, deal with that too. But yes, definitely some of these things that were happening when we started to have children and like all those struggles really did put a strain on our relationship. And I'm so thankful that, we both obviously we both love each other.
Yeah.
So there's always that love. But there's also that introspect introspection. I don't
Yeah.
even know if that's a
Yeah.
word,
It is. Yeah.
but we knew that there it wasn't that, oh, he needed to work on himself, or I needed to work on, or he thought that I needed to work on myself
Yeah.
on me. It was okay, so we both individually have to work on ourselves, because we're a team, and
Yeah.
then we have to come together, and that's where the magic happens, when we're both separately learning about, who we are, trying to figure ourselves out and growing, and then coming together and creating this powerhouse that I like to say of
Yeah,
a
yeah,
relationship that is really creating a powerhouse family.
absolutely, yeah. And I think my wife could probably empathize as well. I spent 6 years in the military,
Hmm.
and uh, very similar in regards to not necessarily knowing when I'm coming or going. Am I going to be away for this? Am I going to be away for that? Not able to talk about what I was doing, things like that. And so there's just certain things that sort of had to come almost exist in a silo. And here she is, sort of left at home, being like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And you probably wonder, like, is he going to come home safe tonight? That kind of thing. So
Hmm.
you carry kind of those unique burdens and worries with you. And so I think that's a very real aspect of being married to someone involved in law enforcement that doesn't really get talked about. And I really like how you framed working on a relationship, because I think, again, we look at a successful relationship. It's not, well, me telling my wife what she needs to work on.
Mm.
That's very disempowering, you know.
Yes.
And so, for you to be able to say, okay, we need to work on these things. I mean, did you kind of discuss it, or did you kind of go on your own self development journey together, or was it kind of, were you moving at different paces, going through different stages at different times? What did that look like?
I think it depends on what we were working on, but we were individually working on ourselves. So I was really working on my self worth and confidence. So, there were things that I was doing and resources that I was um, working on to help me with that. And then Mark was working on something else. So at the same time, in we were working together,
Hmm.
because it's not like we just kind of like went our separate ways and just started working on each other and then came back from like a trip somewhere.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, we were definitely working on some of our individual struggles. But one thing that we started to do was work on our marriage and really finding those resources that would help us. So, one of the things that I remember talking to him about, and this was really when we started diving into life coaching, was understanding when it's a good idea to coach each other and when it's not a good idea to coach each other. When
Yeah.
I wanted him to just, listen
Yep.
and just say, "Hey, I'm sorry that happened," or "Is there anything I can do to help you?" Just sometimes, because he is the fixer.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, there is the one person in the relationship who's the fixer and the other one who isn't. And I'm the emotional one, the one who always wants to talk about things, talk about my emotions.
Yeah.
And he's the one like, "Why are you thinking like that? Just do this, this, and this." But we, after, understanding kind of how relationships work, is
Mm,
that sometimes I just want him to listen. It's like if
absolutely.
I have something going on, I don't want him to fix it. And he
Yeah.
understands that now. And he'll ask
Yeah.
for permission if I maybe, because sometimes I do want to be coached. Sometimes I have something and I'm like, I can't figure this out. Can you help me? So he understands that he has permission
Yeah.
to go in and do some coaching. But most of the time that doesn't happen because
Yeah.
that is not, like he says, she didn't sign up for me to be her coach. She
Yeah.
signed up for me to be her husband and to love her and to cherish
Yeah.
her. So we
Yeah.
we kind of, those were just some of the little things that we learned.
Yeah. I've always said that I'd never coach my wife, and
Mhm.
it's just that's not really what the relationship is about or for. And that doesn't mean that we never share advice or share thoughts or things
Mhm.
like that. But um, like, because my wife isn't a coach, and so sometimes as a coach, like, I live in this world, I'm just, it's like sometimes almost my default mode of operating. I'm just used to listening to people and sort of helping them get clarity around things and so on. And so that's like the natural default mode, when in fact,
Yeah.
very often that's not what's needed. So you talked about working on your relationship and working on your marriage. And I think that's a really interesting thing to shine a bit of a light on here, because one, I think maybe there's a sense of societal shame around if you're working on your marriage.
Mm.
Eh,
Mhm.
And that's really interesting to me. Like, why shouldn't, like, it should actually be normal that we want to work on and improve our marriage. But when you sort of you're at this rocky spot, you're kind of hitting some bumps in the road, and you're like, we weren't really prepared for this,
Hmm.
and you realize you got to have some work, do some work in your marriage. Um, did you feel like there's any kind of sense of failure there, or what was that like for you when you're realizing like, oh crap, we're gonna have to work on this relationship?
I don't think so. Personally, I don't think I felt that way. I think it's very common for people to think that they feel like there's something broken that they have to
Yeah,
fix. But I mean, when you think about, let's say, going to a therapist, you don't go to a therapist so they can fix you. You go to a therapist so that they can help you get unstuck.
yeah,
And it's not necessarily because something is wrong. It's just that, hey, there's these thought patterns that I'm trying to get past, and I need someone to give me a bird's eye view of what's going on so
yeah,
that I can move forward. So I kind of find that to be the same when it comes to marriage. It doesn't mean that there's something broken. It just means that there's things that we can improve upon, right? There's
absolutely,
opportunities to have a really thriving relationship. You may have a good marriage, but why not make it great? So,
absolutely. And I think I look back and I'm guilty of really taking for granted the fact that I've got an incredible wife, and we've always had a pretty good marriage. But I really took it for granted for quite a while. Like she's
mhm,
always going to be there, that kind of thing. And 'cause
mhm,
she's incredibly devoted, and and I'm very loyal to her because she stuck with me through some of like the hardest and craziest stuff that I went through in life. Um, but just like we don't get a certain point in our health, and we go, okay, that's cool. I don't have to work on this anymore.
mhm,
Like we don't think it's weird to work on our natural or our physical health.
mhm.
Why would and I think to myself, like, why would we find it weird that we want to work on the health of our relationship? you know
Yeah.
Now you talk about self-confidence and working on that, and again I think about people, if they bump into you now, they see this this very confident woman, empowered, you have this beautiful family, you're pursuing like a career that you really enjoy, you're building this business and so on, so they really see like maybe this confident powerhouse. um, but you're suggesting that it wasn't always like this.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, it's a complete 180. And I think I struggled with self-confidence my whole life, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really helped me, what I thought was going to help me was, oh, well, I'm at this point in my life where I have two kids. I'm trying to get rid of the baby weight. I just want to feel good. And oh, yeah, I just need to lose 10 pounds, 15
Right.
pounds or something. And I thought that was going to give me confidence. What I didn't realize was that what was going to give me confidence and what was going to help me realize my own worth was the fact that I was going to be consistent with what I said I was going to do. And it was those little daily habits that I was, putting on my little schedule, that if I did it, and whether it was 10 or 20 minutes, but I did it, and then I came back the next day and I did it again, that was boosting my confidence even just a little bit. That was just kind of like these little stepping stones that were helping me with my confidence. The byproduct was, okay, yeah, I did lose the weight,
Mm-hmm.
but just felt good about myself because I decided to do something, and then I actually did it for
Yeah.
myself. Because when you're a mom, you're like, well, it feels selfish to take some time away from my kids. But in reality, you can take 20 minutes to, let's say, do some type of workout, whether it's going on a walk by yourself, so you can clear your mind, or, just go and do some cardio or whatever it is that you want to do for 20 minutes. And then you can spend some really intentional time with your kids because you know that you already took care of yourself, and you are going to you filled your cup, you know,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then, you can give that overflow to your children and really spend intentional time with your kids, because a lot of the times we'll maybe sit down on the couch and watch some TV with the kids, and we're saying we're spending time with our kids, but in reality we're just sitting there with the kids. But let's
Yeah,
say I
there's
go
no
and
interaction
I go,
happening.
yeah. And for me, going into my daughter's room and playing around with her, she has this thing right now where she has a library in her room. She absolutely loves books. So she said, "This is her library and we can check out books." She has a little she drew a little scanner and she can scan the books. I
Aw.
spend 5 minutes with her in there, just diving in with her and pretending I'm, her customer, and going in there, and that 5 minutes, that's all it took. And she was so happy.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to say that, you come first, because you have to take care of yourself, because you can't take care of others.
Yeah.
And then you can have that clear mind. You can feel good because you did something that you said you were going to do. And then you can spend, a few minutes with your kids that's really going to be impactful to them, and that they're actually going to remember. I know she'll remember
Yeah.
that I spent, a few minutes with her in her little library.
Well, because I think, I have an 8-month-old. He's actually 8 months old as of today.
Mm.
So, and but I think about when I spend time with him, I want to be present with him, not just physically present where my mind
Mhm.
is worrying about other things.
Yes.
But I want, because I believe kids can pick up on this, even if they can't express it verbally. They
Yeah.
can pick up when we're present in body but not present in mind. They can see that we're distracted, and it's
Mhm.
interesting. Like his body language and behavior will shift, and he'll try to because I bring him downstairs when I go to work out, and I'm wanting to work out, and but it's also a chance to give my wife a bit of a break. So he kind of hangs out with
Mhm.
me when I work out, but there's very often a shift where he starts just crawling towards me. He's like, no, I don't just want to watch you work out. I want you to interact with me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And these are things that we never regret. I think those little
Mhm.
times we spend with our kids.
Yeah.
And so you touched on something really interesting that I wanted to dig into a bit here: self worth versus weight loss, because we very often connect the two. And I
Mm.
know I struggle with this, and I see this struggle so many times. If I lose the weight, then I'll have confidence. But confidence and physical appearance are not necessarily directly connected or correlated.
No.
I used to be involved in the bodybuilding industry, in the supplement industry and whatnot, and I met people with these very enviable physiques. And you look at them, you think, "Oh my gosh, like you look like the peak of physical perfection," and they were so critical and just like hating their bodies and frustrated and so on. It was really quite sad to see. And you talked about cultivating confidence in a different way, and almost like the weight loss occurred as a byproduct of that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, for someone out there who's like, how do I become confident? Um, what would you say to them?
Um, yeah, like I said earlier, the way that I started to build my confidence was because I knew that I would really not take care of myself in the sense of taking time for self-care.
Yeah,
So, knowing that I said, "Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm gonna take the time and actually schedule it, and I'm going to do it routinely." And then when I actually did it, that is what really boosted my confidence. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with the actual, let's say, the exercise that I had put on my schedule, because I wasn't thinking, well, if I exercise, that's the calories that I'm burning, and
right. Yeah,
eventually down the road, I'll be down 10 pounds or whatever that may be. It
yeah,
wasn't necessarily that. It was, hey, I said I was going to do this for myself, and I actually did it, and I did it over and over and over again. So it's about
yeah,
being consistent with what you said you were going to do. And, it could be with anything. If you say, I really don't feel confident speaking in front of all of these people. I don't, I'm not a public speaker.
yeah,
So even saying I am, and then whatever follows that, I mean, that gets ingrained in your mind.
yeah,
So if you continue to say that, and like these are the pattern of thoughts that we have, if I continue to say I'm not a public speaker, that doesn't really force me to look to see how I can get better,
yeah,
right? So it even starts with that. It's how you speak to yourself. Like, I'm
yeah.
learning how to be a public speaker. So then you start to
Right.
look for, well, maybe I can join a Toastmasters. And that's what I did. I
Yeah,
joined a Toastmasters several years ago, and I just started little by little, and and now I have a podcast, and now I do videos. So that builds confidence.
absolutely. I just jotted a note down here. Confidence starts with proving to yourself that you're worth it.
Yeah.
Confidence can't come from other people. Um,
Right.
it can't come from like even other people's compliments towards you, because ultimately, if you at your core don't believe it to be true, it's
Yes.
it's it's just an empty shell.
Yeah, and
And
belief drives behavior.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I know you've said it before. Yeah.
No, that's super important. And this idea that these little investments in yourself, it's not enough. I think because affirmations alone are not enough either.
Hmm.
Like our words are powerful,
Hmm.
but if our words aren't backed by an action, it's just like our kids know if we say one thing and do another. Well, we also know within ourselves if we say one thing and we do another. Do you use affirmations ever?
I do. I
Okay.
do. And I always kind of thought they were like a little weird.
Yeah.
I didn't want to stand I what I thought what affirmations were standing in front of the mirror and saying how amazing I was and how and you can't really have an affirmation like that if you don't believe it, like you said,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to actually believe what you're saying. So normally what I do now is I create statements that are really something that can help me get to the point where I truly believe it. So, for example, let's say I wanted to wake up early to work out, and I was really, struggling with that, and I wanted to create an affirmation around that. So, I wanted to build an affirmation that had the actions that I was going to take.
Okay.
So, because I am worthy and I need to take care of myself and be a great role model for my children, I, and then whatever it is, I wake up early or I set the alarm for 5 a.m. so that I can have enough time to work out and then go on with my day. So they were really action based because, like you said,
I like
belief
that.
drives behavior, and those were really some of the things that I learned how to do rather than saying I'm something that I really didn't believe in.
Right. So rather than saying, I'm going to try and talk my way into being something that I'm not.
Mhm.
I love how you did that. I call this an action-based affirmation,
Mhm.
and I think you described that really well. In a nutshell, your affirmation is connected to a physical action that you're going to take that's going to reinforce that belief, and then you
Right.
tapped into something deeper as well, and that is your children, and I
Mhm.
like to call it your emotionally compelling reason.
Mhm.
So there's going to be days. So are there days where you don't feel like doing whatever it is you should do?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Especially when the time changes over here.
Yeah.
It just really messes you up. But yeah, I'm human.
Yeah.
And we just have those moments where, sometimes it's, your mindset that's just not there.
Yeah.
And I give myself grace. I say, you know what? I'm going to have these days where I just don't feel like it. And I could either push through and do something, or I can just say, you know what? Tomorrow's another day. Sometimes it's really just, your body is trying to tell you something
Yeah.
where it's like how you have emotions, right? Your body is telling you there's something going on that you need to maybe take a look at. So sometimes when my mindset is not right, I just say, you know what? Maybe I just need a break. Maybe there was a lot that I did yesterday and my mind is just racing and I need to spend some time and just like maybe read a book
Okay.
or just, go outside and just sit there and think. So I do have those days. But they're less frequent now
Hmm.
just because I have done it so many times. And I also know that I am going to feel so much better when I follow through with some of those things.
Do you ever fear that if you let's say like let up or let off the gas, so to speak, that it's gonna start you on this path of like, oh, it feels really good to not do anything, and so now you're gonna slip into this pattern of behavior where now you're not taking as good a care of yourself. Do you ever worry about that when you take a day off?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's happened. So, there was a period in my life where so I got to this point where I was super consistent and I had, reached my physical goals and I was on cloud 9. And there's just moments in your life where maybe something happens and then your thoughts go, every which way and then you go down this path. And I know that I have systems in place that when I do have those moments, I can go back to those systems and say, I can do this.
Hmm.
I have something in place. I'm not starting from square one. I need to, just realize that I don't have to start all over again. I just need to start where I am right now.
So
And
you're not trying
mhm,
to necessarily make up for lost time,
right,
because
right.
that's a fool's errand.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so there was a period of time where I did kind of, I don't want to say fell off the wagon. Um, but I was teetering I
Yeah.
was teetering off of it. But yeah, definitely, like I caught myself and I said, "Okay, I know what to do. It's okay. This happens, and I'm just going to start where I am right now and just keep going."
I like to say that there is no wagon. There's just kind of life,
Yeah.
you know. And there's times where everything is falling into place, and you can kind of be sprinting along and like really making progress. And there's times in life where we're just trying to hold steady. We're in a bit of a holding pattern.
Yeah.
And I think again, do you ever feel like a pressure, like you always like personal growth is powerful, and we should all be in a sense pursuing it. But do you ever feel like that in reality we can't pursue growth infinitely?
Mhm.
So how do you navigate these times where you're kind of in maintenance mode or in a holding pattern?
I do believe that, there's always something to learn and room for growth. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I'm just kind of striving to always be the best version of myself, and then I'm never going to get there. I there's seasons of life, and
Yeah.
there are, times when I'm going to get to a place where I feel really good. But yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, well, there's always going to be, I mean, for the rest of our lives, we're always going to be learning. We're never going to get to that point. But we also need to feel good about what we've achieved and
Yeah.
really kind of celebrate those wins along the way. And I think we could do both at the same time. We can celebrate those wins and continue growing.
Yeah. Now, well, first of all, I'll ask you, how do you celebrate the wins? Because I think there's also a fear out there that if I celebrate my wins, other people might perceive this as arrogance.
Hmm.
So how do you celebrate the wins?
Well, I don't celebrate wins by just going on social media and going, "Look at me, I am
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
amazing." I acknowledge it myself.
Yeah.
You know, I love journals, and I put my wins on there, and it could
Awesome.
be very small wins. It could be, I woke up when the alarm went off today. That's a
Yeah.
win for me. So I
Absolutely.
write it down. That's something to celebrate. And I do that internally. My husband is amazing. He's super supportive. So I celebrate wins with him. I tell him,
Yeah.
"Hey, guess what I just did?" And he is like my biggest cheerleader. So I know that I can share anything with him, and the same thing with him. He can celebrate his wins with me. He can't wait to tell me, what just happened, and we do that. We just continue to celebrate our accomplishments no matter how small they are.
Yeah. And I love that you realize you're not in competition with each other.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
that you don't lose when he has wins, or he doesn't lose when you have wins, and
Mhm.
that really does come from this place of self confidence, where you
Mhm.
realize like, because it's really interesting. Because again, I think if people meet you and Marc, because I've had the pleasure of chatting with Marc as well, and he's quite a remarkable individual, I'll say, you'd probably agree. um,
Yes. I'm a little biased, but yes.
slightly biased, but they would meet you two, and again, sometimes there's a sense of or wondering like both of your senses of self worth come from what you've kind of individually accomplished. It doesn't come from necessarily the other person, but yet together,
Mhm.
um, it seems to work extremely well. And so, if someone was struggling with, because I think why we struggle with something like this, maybe in a relationship, is we watch somebody else grow, and then we see a little bit like reflected back at us,
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm not growing, and I kind of feel like I should be. Um, what advice would you give to someone who's like literally watching their partner? For example, I remember, I'll put it in real world terms. seeing other people like lose weight, and I was struggling so hard with my weight, and I'd get like super angry at watching them lose weight because I wasn't, and really it was I was angry at myself because I wasn't sort of growing and developing. What advice would you give to somebody who might find themselves in a situation like that in a relationship?
Well, I don't think I would give them advice, but I would ask
Okay,
them questions.
I like that.
So I would ask, why is that a problem for you? Because that should be a good thing, right? But obviously I
Mm,
wouldn't say that. But I think that's a good question to ask because it really helps them, you know, get out of their head and really into their heart. So, why is that a problem for you that let's say your spouse is doing this and you feel like you're maybe being left behind
yeah,
or you're not good enough anymore? Because there's always that's a really deep limiting belief for people, for a lot of people, is that they're not good enough. And maybe they find it a threat that their spouse is growing and, oh,
right.
are they going to find somebody else that's better than
Yeah,
me? So
yeah.
really kind of asking them questions. So why is that a problem for you? You know?
I love that.
And then they can really search deep within and say, maybe they'll find, that isn't a problem for me. Maybe I should do that because it's going to be good for me as well. And if we're both doing this, how much better is it going to be? Maybe I have someone who's one step above me or two steps above me who can help me,
Yeah,
you know? So really asking powerful questions to people, I think, is better than giving advice because you never know what the real reason is why they feel the way they feel.
I love that. And I just want to highlight what you did there. That's really amazing because I think good coaching, in fact, exceptional coaching, is not about having all the answers.
Mhm.
It's about having like really well timed questions that are powerful.
Yeah.
And I won't share it here, but very often I say like I had one question that a coach asked me that changed my life,
Mhm.
and it was literally because of a well timed question. Not giving me advice, but asking me a question. Because when we ask questions, we actually empower people to find the answers within themselves. Because I think there's this temptation to, I'm going to hire this coach and they're going to solve all my problems. But it's
Mhm.
like if you hand me all your problems and I solve them and hand the solutions back to you, you have not grown or developed, and I haven't done my job.
And you don't have the power.
Yeah,
That actually takes the power away from people. Yeah.
yeah. So I absolutely love that. Now, you mentioned that you have systems in place to support you when you find yourself starting to slip or to slide. What does that look like in real life? Because we'll hear that, oh, I have systems in place. What are those systems, or how would you define them?
Mhm. Well, sometimes they're physical things.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned earlier, I love journals. And I have journals that have a specific place where you can write all of your goals and have a place where you can celebrate your wins and, write out your day. So, I will go back to some of those things and see, when you kind of can see your goals on paper, and it kind of gives you a bit more clarity as to why it is that you're trying to move forward. Like there was a point in your life that you wrote down those goals because you wanted something.
Yeah,
So I will go back to, and I keep these journals, and I will go back and say, well, okay, I wrote this down as a goal at this period of time. What was I striving for? Okay, well, what if I kind of tweak this because this is a different period in my life, a different season, and that can like get me back in to when I felt my best. Because usually when you're creating goals, you feel really inspired or motivated, right? So go back to that time, you know,
yeah.
when you felt like you were moving forward and really excited so like you can jump back in.
I think you have a quotable tweet there. You, you wrote down those goals because you wanted something.
Yeah.
I love that. Really bringing people back and connecting it because it's very easy. Just in the we live in the world of a never-ending now, especially on social media, where
Mhm.
it's this infinite and constant stream of ever-changing information, which I think is very disconcerting for people, and it can be a real challenge to kind of take a step back and just
Mhm.
reconnect to your own self and your own life instead of getting lost in everything that's coming your way.
Yeah.
So you run an online business as well as a podcast, and you navigate quite a sort of a virtual life.
Mhm.
How do you keep that in its place when you're trying to have a vibrant marriage and to be a rock star mom?
Thank you. Well, it takes practice, and I have to really, dig into some of the things that just don't serve me. So going on social media is has to be very intentional, because I know that if I go into social media with a not so great state of mind, it'll just bring me down even more.
Mhm.
So I have to, make sure that I keep things, separate. When I'm working, I have my things, because I have a virtual business, and my computer and my phone are part of my business. So those are there when it's time to work. When it's not, they get put away. I mean, we don't even leave our phones on the nightstand. We used to do that because I'm sure people do that a lot. And then, like, the first thing they do when they wake up is what? They
Look at their
pick up their
phone.
phone.
Yeah.
And then that can completely ruin your day depending on what you see, especially if you go on there and see the news. That
Mhm.
could completely derail you. So we've created a space for our phones in our closet. They get
Okay.
charged in our closet. That's where they stay. When it's family time, there's no phones. They're put away, and we can be intentional with our family. And
Yeah.
we spend really intentional time with our family, and I think that that's been a really big focus in the last maybe year and a half, especially after, we're with each other for, a long period of time in
Yeah.
quarantine. We found ways to really connect with each other and really get to know each other, because it's kind of strange to think that like you had to kind of figure out who your kids are, what makes them tick, what
Yeah.
how they feel loved. Understanding all of that was really incredible, and just making sure that we knew when things needed to happen, being intentional about things, and just keeping that all separate.
I love that no phone family time.
Yeah.
It's because again, I watch my little son. He's 8 months, and watching him develop and watching him observe us and imitate us, and I'm just I'm like hyper conscious of him seeing me on my phone, and I run an online business too, and so there are times that I need to have it, but like his face lights up when he hears a video of him playing or something, because of course we have family around the world in different countries, and so we're sending videos and things because we can't be together in person. But yeah, his face absolutely like lights up, and he gets his arms and legs all start flapping when he hears like himself on there. And so already we recognize like there's this real connection to screens. There's this compelling draw in the human brain, and I don't think, especially at his age, it's very very easy to. In fact, he doesn't have the capacity to regulate it whatsoever.
Mhm.
And so, if I may ask, what ages are your kids now?
11 and 12.
Okay, you you said something else really interesting, getting to know your kids
Mhm.
and how they like to be loved. That really stood out to me. That is incredibly powerful, because they are these independent, well, maybe not fully independent, but they're these autonomous human beings.
Yes.
And so you're right. It might sound strange to want to know these things. How do you navigate that? How do you find these things out?
We just found different resources to help us understand that, parenting books, and we dove into the love languages as well to kind of understand each other. But we also play games, because we know that the kids are still small. I mean,
Yeah.
they're almost teenagers, they're preteens, so they're kind of going through this weird phase, but they're still kids and they still like to play. So we try to make it fun for them. And the one time we got together as a family and wrote down on post-it notes, for each one of us, how we feel most loved by that person. So let's say my daughter Alyssa, I wrote down that I love that she is always so caring, or she'll say she's just a cheerleader. She's like, "Great job, mommy. You did this and you did an amazing job." So I wrote down when she does that, and like different things. And then we put them up on a big board, and we posted it all up. There were a bunch of little post-it notes. So each one of us got to read how everybody feels, like how we show them love.
Mm-hmm.
So they stood up and said, Daddy, um, I feel most loved by Daddy when he does this, this, and this. So maybe it's walks. Our kids
Yeah.
really love, to walk with us and to be able to chat with us. So things like that, which took about 20, 25 minutes, was really impactful for them. And they had a lot of fun doing that. But then we also learned about them.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, they really love it when we do that. We need to do more of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's incredible. Like really fostering this deep connection with your kids, this relationship. I wonder if sometimes people are afraid of really opening themselves up to experiencing, maybe we could say even love in all of its fullness, because
Hmm.
there's also a fear of losing it and how much that would hurt. Because I often reflect. My wife used to call me the Tin Man. Yeah, she says I know they're in there. I know those feelings are in there somewhere. You know, um, does it ever feel? Do you ever feel vulnerable in a sense when you're really learning to love this fully and completely within your family unit?
Yeah. And I think back to my childhood, you know, my parents got separated and then divorced in a time in my life when I was a teenager.
Hmm.
I was very going through a lot of different changes. So it was very chaotic for me. Um, but I remember that we never talked about that. We never talked about feelings. We never talked about some of the things that, I do now with my children. And yeah, I think that because I felt maybe betrayal and things like that, those were some of the things that I had to work through with a therapist
Hmm.
so that I could open up, because I actually remember my husband one time years ago, he called me cold. That hurt so bad because I guess I wasn't affectionate,
Hmm.
but I I thought, first off, that was something that was really, really hurtful. And I didn't realize I was doing that. I was maybe giving him the cold shoulder, or just the way that I was processing my emotions were very hurtful towards him. But I think that I think what you said, that I was maybe afraid of loving so much because I saw my parents and
Yeah.
the way that, the trauma that my mom went through. Um, and yeah, I think that really can affect you a lot.
Yeah. Well, and kudos to Mark for expressing how it made him
Mhm.
feel. That's not an easy thing for men to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite significant. So, I could keep asking you questions. You have a lot of wonderful things here. I really appreciate how generous you've been, and also how open and vulnerable you've been. I think it's vulnerable you've been. That's really really valuable for people to see because I love to get beyond. Like I think obviously presenting an ideal for people has value on social media. We want to show people something to aspire to or something to be inspired by.
Mhm.
But I think it also makes it more real when we recognize there's a human being behind this. It's not
Mhm.
all of this perfect, glossy manicured magazine picture or something like that. There's a real human life, human story, human struggle behind this, so
Right.
that it doesn't feel so unusual for people when they struggle. Because I think we often have this idea that somehow there's a future out there where we don't have struggles.
No,
Future,
doesn't exist.
no, doesn't exist. But I think you would agree that how we navigate the struggles looks totally different than how it used to live.
Yes.
And so, maybe you could share a little bit about organized chaos and what is that you do now, because you're taking all of this powerful life experience, all of these struggles that you have, and really you're able to now use that to be a force for good in other people's lives.
Yeah, when I created Organized Chaos, I really wanted to talk about some of the things that I had struggled with and how I was able to overcome them, or just, things that I was currently struggling with, and some maybe sharing some of the resources that were really helping me in real time. So, a lot of the things that I talk about have to do with mindset, because I think that that's one of the number one things that has helped me um, throughout these years, is really understanding, um, you know, becoming aware of my thoughts and what
Yeah.
that is leading me to do. So, there's a lot of different things that I talk about. And, it's organizing the chaos because, some of us have really chaotic lives,
Yeah.
especially if we have businesses, and then, we're parents and we're married, and it can feel chaotic sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are ways that we can really still have a beautiful life, amongst the chaos. So I share a lot of things that have helped me, really create just harmony,
Hmm.
between life and really business in our case, and just being able to continue to thrive.
Yeah. And harmony is an interesting one because, again, I think sometimes there's this idea that everything floats along smoothly.
Hmm.
But you look at a duck that's like, for example, you see the ducks or a swan, swimming across a pond, and they look so graceful and they're gliding along and so on. What you don't see is underneath, like their
Yes.
their feet are paddling furiously to sort
Yeah.
of to make that happen. And so I think there's just a lot that goes on under the surface to make it look like things are moving fairly effortlessly. So if people want to get in touch with you, I mean, I've got the Organized Chaos website up here. What's the best way for them to connect with you? And if they want to, if they really appreciate what you've shared here and maybe want to get some help from you, how do they do that?
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So you can go to, or anybody could go to organizedchaospodcast.com, where, you can contact me there, or you can just listen to the episodes. I have tons of episodes, with lots of different experts talking about all kinds of things, a lot of mindset, a lot of, personal growth and things, talking
Yeah.
about routines and schedules. Or you can, go to Instagram and find me there. I'm at THFitness2, and I talk about a lot of the same things there.
Awesome. Let's see, click on that, see if it takes there. So TH Fitness too, because you have a passion for kind of health and fitness as well, but
Mhm.
you said your coaching is kind of expanding into to more than just sort of fitness and nutrition coaching. Um, if somebody wants to work with you as a coaching client, what would that look like?
Well, I'm actually in the process of putting it all together. I was discussing with you earlier that I'm pivoting my business a little bit. And what I'm really going to be doing is helping, female entrepreneurs find clarity, between their life, and business goals. So, really, kind of the same thing that I'm doing with Organized Chaos, but focusing on, women like me who have a passion, and but also really want to be able to raise a family the best way they can, and
Mm-hmm.
banish mom guilt, because that's a really big
Yeah.
big problem. Even if you don't have a business, maybe you're working outside of the home and you have guilt around that, and really just getting rid of that and just focusing on how you can be intentional and be clear about what it is that you want, and really focus on that.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful what you're doing. Partly because this isn't something you just read a book about. And so I often joke, like in the coaching space, it's easier to teach someone to do a backflip than to learn how to do a backflip.
Mm,
Um, but in this metaphor, you've already learned how to do the backflip, which puts you in a much better position to maybe teach others how to do that. I think maybe trying to juggle family life, professional life, and business is a bit like trying to learn how to do a backflip and not face plant. So
yeah.
um, any last words you'd like to leave our listeners with? Anything you'd like to share, just to kind of tie it up in a nice little bow?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many things that we feel like we need to work on sometimes, but just picking one thing, starting off with habits, and starting off small. Pick up a
Mm-hmm.
habit. Maybe, you've been trying to focus on your health and you don't know where to start, and it can feel overwhelming, especially if you go online. Really, all you have to do is maybe go for a walk and make that a habit,
Yeah,
and then create another habit that can go with that, and just start small.
yeah, I love that. That's very much in alignment with my message. I say like my own transformation in terms of self love and self compassion, self care started with a regular habit of brushing my teeth.
Hmm.
A little action that signals that I'm worth investing in.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Teresa. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, I really appreciate your willingness and to share your openness in terms of your story, because I think that's what really touches lives, and that's really what we want to do here with Wellness Unplugged is show people a little behind the scenes look at sort of the human struggle, the reality of trying to create change and transformation, and how to do it. And so your willingness to share has really been valuable and powerful. So I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, this is it for another episode of Wellness Unplugged. Stay tuned. We're coming at you live again tomorrow.